I started off as an actor by accident. I decided I wanted to carry on being a student and got into RADA. And it was halfway through RADA, going down the stairs one day, I thought, I quite like this game, dressing up and pretending to be somebody else. And as long as I can bear any responsibility financially particularly that I might have to do, I'll stick at it. And I was fairly lucky. I started off in theatre and then got a series called Parkin's Patch, which was a little police series, and was an enormous learning curve for me because it happened at a slump in the industry. And so our guest stars are people like Mona Washbourne, Roger Livesey, Jack McGowan, Pauline Collins, Brian Cox. And the directors were the terrible twins from Granada in those days, called Michael Apted and Michael Newell, who went on to do rather good things. And the other one who also went on to do rather good things was Stephen Frears. So it was a fantastic learning curve. After that, I then did various television plays, including a one called Stocker's Copper, which got Best Play, and I was nominated for BAFTA and all sorts of things. And then, sometime after that, and I worked with Jimmy Gatwood a couple of times, who was, of course, the producer of Star Maidens. And I think it was probably Jimmy Gatwood. I mean, I don't actually know how I got the part. In those days, unlike now, you didn't actually go for interviews and queue up with a long line of people to go in one by one. You were asked to do something. And if you wanted to do it, you said yes. And I have a feeling that that's what happened with Star Maidens. Jimmy had probably said to my agents, is Gareth available? I'd like him to do so-and-so, and sent me the script. It coincided with a series of, BBC used to do what they call a pilot series, which was 3 or 4 different one-off plays. And those that were successful with the public would go on to do a series. And I'd done one of these, and just before I was asked to do Star Maidens, I was also asked to do this television series, BBC. I'd had a little bit of a rough time, a few months out of work, and because it was ITV, the money for Star Maidens was an awful lot better than it was for this BBC television series. I can't actually remember whether it was Poldark. I think it was Poldark. So anyway, I took the Star Maidens, which of course ran for 13. I fear to think how many Poldark ran for. I mean, I know it would have been an awful lot more money to do Poldark. But there you go. I mean, it's just one of those things. You make those decisions and they're not always right. But that roughly was my career up to that point. Oh, plus, of course, doing quite a lot of theatre. When my agents phoned and told me that I was, asked to do this part, I then said, well, obviously, can I see some scripts? So they sent scripts, and that was when I realised that it was a multinational production, which I must confess, slightly excited by, because I think it was one of the first television things that was really multinational. I mean, there was French in it, there were Germans in it, there was a German director. I think it was only France, Germany, and England. And so that made it quite exciting and very different. As for the content, well, very few actors, particularly young ones, can worry too much about the specific content because it's work. I can't remember my initial reaction to the script, but I mean, obviously it wasn't a disaster, otherwise I wouldn't have done it. So I mean, that's, as I say, I don't think we had meetings. I mean, we had a read-through, obviously. But I don't think one had meetings to discuss, do you want to do this, and is your face the right face, and all that. That had been done behind my back. So I mean, that's how you got it. It was the same with Blake 7. I was asked to do it. When I got the scripts, I would have got all 13 scripts, purely because I had to know, of course, what the whole story was. So obviously I would realise I was only in 6 or whatever it was. As far as interpretation of the role is concerned, obviously my character was much weaker than Pierre Brice's character, besides which he was the good-looking one. And he was too, actually, very good-looking and very scary, in the sense that he used to drive me everywhere in his French Peugeot, and because I knew where the locations were, and so it was easier for us to drive together. And there are a few hairy moments there. Left-hand drive with a crazy young Frenchman. We got on very well together, and I think a lot of it just because he was a good actor, and hopefully, well, the only one who can't tell you whether you're a good actor or not is yourself, but hopefully we worked together well. And so I think any form of role reversal, whatever you like to call it, just happened because of the script. And if you're interpreting the scripts the way they're supposed to be interpreted, that automatically happens. That's my job. I don't think I consciously thought, I thought I was the weaker character, but I wouldn't say he was a feminine character. I think it's the same with any script. You actually automatically slot into what you're supposed to be doing and don't think about the deep psychological undertones. They should just appear, hopefully. Pierre and I got on very well. I mean, he, I think, had been told that I'd done quite a lot of work. And he told me what work he'd done. And I gradually found out from the rest of the cast, Christiana Kruger, who was Hardy Kruger's daughter, and various others, how big he was in Germany. Because, I mean, I wouldn't know that unless I'd been told, because I don't watch much television in Germany. But, I mean, Hardy Kruger's daughter, Christiana Kruger, was also quite a big name. And also Christian Quadflieg was actually quite big in Germany. Pierre, I believe, was also fairly big in France, because I think he'd done a couple of films by then. But of course, as I say, I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me, really. I mean, they're just actors working with me, or I'm working with them, whichever like the way you look at it. And as far as the Brits were concerned, well, Dawn Addams, of course, had been around for quite a long time and was very well known. Judy Geeson, I think, was sort of fairly well at the height of her film career at the time. And Lisa was doing very well, and I'd been at RADA with Lisa. I mean, she arrived one term before I left, I think. So, I mean, it was actually quite a high-powered cast. And some of the guest artists, people like Ronnie Fraser, Alfie Bass, Derek Farr, were all quite well-known names. Not, well, shall we say, quite well-known faces on British television. I mean, I don't think many people, well, not too many people knew my name necessarily, but they knew my face. And so it was a fairly high-powered cast. If I remember rightly, most of my stuff was done on location. I did go into the studio a couple of times, but I think the studio is very largely sort of the ladies' domain. I think Pierre and I were out on all sorts of locations. I mean, funnily enough, some of the locations we used later on Blake 7, but that's one of the science fiction things, I suppose, the limits to how many locations you can actually have. No, most of my stuff was on location. Some of the locations were lovely. I mean, we went to Broughton Castle outside Banbury, went down to Cookham Weir on the Thames. I mean, lovely locations, and not too far from London, which makes it easier for the base. Bray Studios, well, that's fairly near Cookham Weir anyway. And they are lovely studios. I mean, I've done various other things there. I can't remember what, but I have done quite a few things in Bray Studios. But as you say, yes, most of my work was actually done on location, which suits me fine. I don't like studios, but on a nice hot summer, it's not much fun to be stuck in a studio all day. Anything that's done by ITV, particularly with international money, is going to be pretty good and pretty effective and pretty impressive. One of the criticisms of Blake 7 was the bargain basement Star Trek and cheap sets and everything else. They weren't that cheap, but they were not as impressive, shall we say, as Star Maidens sets. No, I think all the sets that I remember in studio were mostly fairly impressive. Occasionally I was doing a scene or whatever, and the ladies would be around, and of course it was a planet ruled by ladies. And I mean, all Pierre Brice and I did when we weren't having a scene with them, we'd sit there ogling, going, ooey, 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 you know.
They must have women on Earth.
But they're submissive women. They take orders from men. Can you imagine?
When we were making it, the overall impression was, I mean, I found it quite funny that you've got this planet ruled by women. I thought, well, somebody's trying to make a statement somewhere. We didn't have Jermaine Greer, actually, as a guest artist, but just about everything else. I don't think any of us really had the impression of thinking that deeply. You took episode by episode, you read the whole script, you became aware of things like the possibility that these two women were lesbians, perhaps. Everybody was wandering around in thigh boots and everything else, but then so were they down the King's Road in Chelsea. Mini skirts and goodness knows what. And again, all you did was turn around and say, whoa. But I don't think one thought deeply saying, is this actually making a subconscious statement? I'm sure that perhaps Jimmy, for instance, Jimmy Catwood, did have that intention in mind. And I'm sure that part of the thing that lost that for the audience, that specific subconscious intention, was the fact that there was lots of comedy in it. Some of it deliberate and some of it not. But then that's the same with every script you do. You suddenly find something which actually is quite funny. As far as socialising is concerned with the whole lot of us then, all the Brits had homes to go to, so as soon as you finished, you went home. And so what happened to the others, I don't know. Whether I don't even know if they were in the same hotel. I mean, the only socialising we did really was at lunchtime in the canteen or whatever, either in the canteen or if we were on location at the location caterers. Socialising is really only if you're staying in a hotel or something. You're all in one hotel and you have no option but to socialise. But if you're living at home and being taken out every morning, you very rarely socialise. Plus the fact that filming, particularly in summer, you're liable to be called at sort of 6:15 in the morning, or picked up at 6:15 in the morning. So you're not going to be on a bender till 2. You think, I've got a big dialogue scene tomorrow, I better get home and learn it. I can't remember how the whole thing started. We were in the studio most of the time. Yes, it was called Escape to Paradise, wasn't it? No, I really can't remember. It was the first time I worked with Pierre, so I think I was probably almost more conscious of working with him than actually the content, if you see what I mean, the overall story, because the first time you work with somebody, and particularly somebody who is not even English, although his English was extremely good, you're more concerned as to finding out the way he works, because it's much easier for me in my own country to give to him than it is for him to give to me.
Earth?
Earth, chef. Where the stories are true, men rule their own world.
Oh, such a planet must be paradise.
Paradise.
So the second episode, Nemesis, remember very little about it except car chases with no drivers, stuntmen frantically sitting under the thing, they're controlling the brakes and everything else, can't see where they're going, which is always exciting to watch because it doesn't involve us, so we sit and watch these shots. We filmed in a wood. It was the same wood, I can't remember what it was called. I keep wanting to say Black Forest, but it's not. We filmed there in Blake 7 as well. Then we go to a farmhouse and see this woman. And one thing I do remember about this episode is running away with Pierre and having to jump on a trampoline to clear a wall because of these supernatural powers we had. And we did one take and I think I fell over, or Pierre fell over or something on the wrong side of the wall. So we went again and I hit the trampoline, sailed over wonderfully, and at the peak of the sort of sail, I suddenly went and I thought, oh my God, that's my trousers. To breakfast time, just split. So I thought, we'll have to do that again. They didn't, because of course the shot was front on, so they didn't see that I'd split my trousers. We did that take and then they changed my trousers. Oh, no, they sewed them up actually. I said, I'm not having you sewing them whilst I'm wearing them. So I had to take them off and spend ages whilst they sewed them up again. I always remember that. I think Pierre got away with it actually, he didn't split his trousers. They must have been very tight because I was slim then.
Not bad.
Drive wheels are under direct control from the master drive computer, steering wheel from the sensor. Where do we go from here?
As far as we can from those women.
And after that, episode 3, Nightmare Cannon, I think it was called. If I remember rightly, we filmed that in Broughton Castle, which is just outside Banbury. Wonderful, wonderful old castle, still inhabited by Lord and Lady Say and Seal, with a beautiful moat. And Alfie Bass was supposed to be the gatekeeper. Well, I'd worshipped Alfie Bass since the days of Bootsy and Snudge. I'm very pleased to say I worked with Bill Fraser in another series. And it was a boiling hot day again. And come lunchtime, we thought to ourselves, well, why don't we sort of have a swim or a paddle in the moat? That'd be quite nice, wouldn't it? And Lord Say and Seal said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. It's full of pike. So we didn't. And I said to Alfie Bass later on, I said, why not? I mean, what difference do pike make? They're not going to. Did he say pike or piranha? I mean, pike are not going to go for human beings. Anyway, we didn't paddle in the moat. That was an episode which I worked with 2 actors that I'd worked with before and got on very well with, Graham Crowden and Ronnie Hines. I can't remember what I'd worked them on, to be honest. But so there was sort of a group of us who got on awfully well together. And of course, I mean, Broughton Castle is the most fantastic location, especially in the sun. I do remember I had to freeze Alfie Bass and pick him up and carry him out. Thank goodness he was quite a small man, and I was a lot fitter and younger than I am now, and was able to do so. Not for too many takes, but for 2 or 3 anyway. Next episode I don't remember anything about, except it was kidnapped. Judy Geeson was kidnapped. We were desperately trying to find her and rescue her and all that. And I can't remember the car I had to drive, but I seem to remember I was a sort of chauffeur in that episode, which is sometimes quite difficult to drive, because when you are a driver, you automatically do everything. You don't really think about it. When you've got to stop and hit a mark, which is difficult enough anyway, and then get out of the car, you tend to forget your seatbelt, or you forget the order that you turn off the engine, take it out of gear, put the brake on. All those things suddenly become terribly important because you don't want to muck up the shot, and you inevitably muck up the shot. You know, you leave it in gear and don't turn the thing off, take your foot off, sorry, cut, do that again. And also similarly getting into the car too. You forget the order, you know, you left it in gear and then poof, and that again, or you don't take the handbrake off, or you don't put your seatbelt on, and you can spend an awful lot of time doing the ordinary mundane things that you forget when it's focused upon. That's all I remember that episode, driving Pierre around. And Pierre had a great sense of humour. We did actually have quite a lot of laughs, just, you know, I mean, he was telling me French jokes and I was telling him English jokes. Just to fill the time really whilst we were driving along, you know. Again, it's misty in my memory, filming in a housing estate somewhere, which wasn't completed, which didn't really help either, because they were probably trying to carry on building whilst we were filming. The guest artist was Ronnie Fraser. As Keppel. 2 of the Medusan guns had been stolen. I can't remember what happened to them all. I do remember, that was also the one, or one of the ones that was directed by the German director Wolfgang Storisch, that's right.
That's one of our guests. You'll be in trouble over that.
And my lasting memory of that episode is at the end of it, Ronnie Fraser gets one of these big guns and points it, I think, at me. And there was no dialogue. And the director, through an interpreter, explained to Ronnie, would he say a line as he points his gun at me? I'm sure it was cut out, but so we do the scene and Ronnie points the gun at me and he says, "This will bring tears to your eyes on a Saturday night." And I thought, that's never going to stay in. The director actually kept it in for the initially because he didn't realise what it meant. But I'm quite sure it went on the cutting room floor.
You must understand these are female weapons. They can be temperamental.
Oh, yes.
There were 2 German actresses who were feminists, I believe, in the early 1970s. I wouldn't have done it if I'd known. I mean, it went out before 9 o'clock. You can't have that. I mean, changing the subject, I mean, Blake 7, for instance, was only 2 or 3 years later. And in the first episode of Blake 7, there was a fake trial. I was set up as a child molester. And when it was sold to America, it was about 3 or 4 years before they'd show that episode. They just wouldn't show it. No, can't have anything like that.
We shall make Earth into another Medusa.
Another Medusa?
Oh, absolutely disgusting. Oh, avert your eyes.
Oh.
Have a nice day.
Don't be late.
Towards the end of the series, I can't remember exactly what number episode it was, we did an episode called Hideout, which Pierre either wasn't in or was in very, very short time. And I was sort of rescued and looked after by an earth woman called Rose, played by Connie Collins, I think. The object of this episode, I think, largely, was to really distinguish the difference between earth women and the Medusans, and also to present me with a dilemma as Shem, as to how to handle this. I mean, I've spent my entire life subservient, and here was a woman who wanted to make my breakfast and, you know, re-dye my white streak in my hair and things like that, you know, which was fun. My real lasting memory of this episode, actually, is Rose was supposed to be on the river somewhere, and she was drifting towards a weir, And I was supposed to come running along the bank, dive in, go and rescue us, because of the supernatural powers, stop the boat going over the weir, and that's fine. And my real lasting episode of this, and I will never forget this one, is we did one take, and that was fine. Freddie Francis was directing it. And he had 2 cameras, one under the weir and one on top of the bridge. And we did the first shot, and of course the boat was tied off. I mean, there's a prop man further up the bank from me with the rope holding the boat, you know, so it didn't go over the weir. And it was a stunt girl in the boat. So we did the first take, and Freddie Francis said, "I'd like it, because it's tied off, just a little bit closer to the weir. It's not, you know, not a very good shot." So turnover and action, and just as he said action, I heard a very slight splash and thought nothing more of it. Dived in. I'm not a very strong swimmer. I can swim, but I'm not a very strong swimmer. Got out to the boat. The next thing I know, it's gone over the weir, shattered, and I'm somewhere down the bottom there. With the weir, water does that. I didn't even think about this. I was just thinking, God, I'm underwater. I shouldn't be here. Down comes a stuntman, grabs hold of me and pushes and goes up. And by the time he hauled me out, he was explaining the water does that at the bottom of a weir. And I would have been in deep, deep trouble. The boat had shattered. The stunt girl had got out. And it was a very, very elderly cameraman looking across the weir. And Freddie was thrilled as long as we were both okay. And at this point, it was a classic Ready When You Are, Mr. DeMille. He hadn't turned over. So Freddie only had that one shot on top of the bridge, which still looked great. But I mean, but I do remember that. I could well have drowned if that stuntman hadn't come in and just grabbed hold of me and thrust upwards to the, you know, above the water. That I will never forget. Could have cut short a burgeoning career.
That was very brave, sir. Now, if you'll be kind enough to come with me.
2 spaceships in flight. Medusan design and composition. No firepower, no defense. They haven't changed.
If you don't actually have to see the face, it doesn't matter who's doing it, really. And so you can get an extra, or sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes you can even get a crew member to do it. Especially nowadays when you don't have to be a member of Equity. Thank you, Mrs. Thatcher. I mean, it is very different now. Because not having to be a member of Equity, well, you can haul somebody off the street and say, your face looks right, come and do this. And we'll pay you almost nothing because, you know, we can't do anything about it. But no, that does sometimes happen. You get somebody else to do it, and if they haven't got any lines, there's no point in getting an actor because they cost an awful lot more. Well, a bit more. Not a lot, just a bit. When we started, there was no suggestion there might be a second series. Normally, or usually, shall we say, if you're doing a series like this, certainly now, they would do what they call an option contract, which means you've got to do the first series, obviously. Then they have you under option, it's a one-way option, mind you, for a second series. I mean, like the thing I'm doing now, Distant Shores, they had us, or some of us, under option for the second. But at the time then, I don't think there was ever any suspicion on the set. I mean, I suppose some people might have said, well, yeah, it would be great if we went to a second series, isn't it? But there was no question of discussing that with actors or anything. The danger with that, of course, is that if the company decides to go for a second series, can they get the same cast, unless they put you under option contract. But I don't remember ever having thought, oh, there will be a second series, or there may be a second series. If there had been, somebody mentioned the fact there might have been Canadian money involved and do it in Canada. If that had been the case, I think they would have maybe kept the storyline, the vague idea of the planet ruled by women, etc. But I think they would have almost totally recast everything else. Because if they'd done it in Canada, they wouldn't have been bothering about Britain. They would have gone very, very much for the American market, big American market. And so I think all of us lot would have been recast. But I don't remember ever hearing a possibility of a second series. I had, if I remember rightly, very few scenes with people like Lisa and Dawn Adams and Christian. I can't remember why I didn't have much with Christian Quadfleet, but I don't think, if I remember right, I don't think I did. I can't think why, but I do remember one occasion when the car picked us up to take us out filming. and the car also picked up Judy Geeson. Can't remember where she lived at the time, but somewhere in posh London. And oh dear, Judy, oh dear, perhaps I'd better sit in the boot. But I worked very little with those people because it was two, or not separate halves, but very nearly. I mean, there was us outside and them nearly always in the studio. I mean, I think Dawn and Lisa and Christiana very rarely came out onto location. They were nearly all Bray stuff. So my memories of them are very few and far between, really, because I seem to remember, I must have been working with Christiana Kruger, because one of the conversations, which I found very interesting, nothing to do, well, not nothing to do with Star Maidens, was that she was absolutely amazed, as were nearly all the foreign actors, that British actors had no idea what we were going to do next. Come the end of Star Maidens, we had no idea. You know, we could be doing an advert, we could be out of work for 10 months. All of the foreign actors, French and the Germans, knew what they were doing for about 2 years. And this was the thing they just couldn't understand. How can you live like that? And we said, well, that's the nature of our business over here. So I must have been working with doing a scene with Christiana then, because she was the one who kept on saying, how can you do that? You know, and my father knows what he's doing for about 5 years, you know. And I said, well, the only people over here who know things like that are opera singers. Working with people like Judy Geeson and Derek Farr is great fun. Derek was a very experienced television and theatre actor. I don't know what Judy done on stage, but she was sort of at the height of her film career. And I must admit, in those days, I was a little bit in awe, purely because she was so well known then. No, it's great fun working with any good actors and actresses. I'm changing the subject entirely now, but somebody once said to me, who are the actors you like working with most? Some time ago now, a press man. And I said to him, well, I'll name a few names, but you probably don't know who they are. And he said, well, who? And I said, Freddie Jones, Ian Holm, people like that, Mike Gambon. And he said, well, why do you say those people? And I said, well, they're the people that make me better. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, it's like playing table tennis against the world champion. I'm going to lose, but by God, I'll never play better table tennis. And people like that make you better. And I'm not saying Judy and Derek made me better, but certainly they make you keep your socks up. You know, you can't relax and just sort of, you know, play around. I don't think I ever thought of Star Maidens when I was doing Blake 7 or when I was asked to do Blake 7. I don't think I've ever put together 2 and 2 with other things. You know, if I've done something and then out of that has come something else. It doesn't occur to me really. It's each individual job I take as sacrosanct, that's it, that's what I have to focus my concentration on and become whatever the character is. And so I don't think of previous stuff. There's a wonderful story with an actor called Freddie Jones, and he and myself and Windsor Davis were recording for audio Under Milkwood with every actor who was Welsh and Tony Hopkins and everybody else. And the three of us finished recording at 3 o'clock on a very hot May afternoon in Oxford Street in the days when pubs closed at 3. And the three of us went, and Freddie said, the ML Club. So we found this little drinking club around the back of Portman Square. And we had a few jars, you know, I mean, not too many, but a few. And we bought another round, and Freddie picked up his glass and he went, the first today. I said, what do you mean the first today, Freddie? You just had 3 pints. Yes, I know, Gareth, but I never like looking back. I thought, what a great line for a drinker. I did an enormous amount of television, things like By the Sword Divided and London's Burning, and a series which also was nominated, for which I was also nominated, a thing called Morgan's Boy, which I think was one of the most wonderful things I've done on television. The writing was superb. Mind you, it did beg a question. At the end of it, the character, Welsh hill farmer, shoots his dog and shoots himself. And it was the very last shot. And, you know, the series was very successful, all filmed down in South Wales, in the Brecon Beacons. And I was driving through there about 3 months later, after it had been shown. And I went to the local pub where I used to go at lunchtime, I can't think why. And the landlord knew me and whatever, and he said, oh, Gareth, great to see you, oh, fantastic. Oh, hey, Morgan's Boy, didn't have to go down well around here. He said, do you remember old Tom? He used to sit over in the corner, cloth cap, hill farm, a bit like Morgan. And I said, yes, vaguely I do remember. Well, he never said a word. I said, yes, I do remember old Tom. Yeah, he said, well, He shot himself, left a message saying Morgan's boys showed me how to do it. And he thought it was hysterically funny, and I thought, how much responsibility can an actor take? And it took me about 3 weeks before I said, he would have done it anyway. It's got nothing to do with that. I can't take responsibility for that. Anyway, to go on from that. I moved out of London up to Scotland 15 years ago, which was very nearly professional suicide, apart from the fact that when I got here, the first job I got was London's Burning, followed by a West End show. But after that, it just went because London thought I was dead or retired, and Scotland didn't know I was here. And I bumped into the director of the Royal Lyceum here in the street, and I'd worked with him many years ago. And I told him, I'm living in Scotland now, Kenny. And so then things started up here. But television just died. I mean, I'd done 15 years almost solid television, and it just died completely. I've done 2 televisions up here in Scotland in 15 years. One of them a Taggart. But I've done an enormous amount of theatre. And you get people coming up to you and saying, recognise you from something like Blake 7, or possibly London's Burning, or possibly Morgan's Boy. And they'll chat to you and they'll say, you're still in the business? And you suddenly realise, of course, if they're television people, they won't see you on theatre, so they assume you don't work anymore. Which I can understand, but it's a little bit disturbing. You have to turn around and say, yes, I've virtually never stopped. I've been very lucky. And they say, oh, great, yes, oh, that's nice. But I mean, I have been lucky. I got into Heartbeat and did 5 or 6 episodes of Heartbeat. And I was doing an episode of Heartbeat, actually, when the thing I'm doing now, a thing called Distant Shores, with Peter Davis and Samantha Bond, and me. It's a strange character. I'm supposed to be head of this weird island, who's the vicar and a solicitor. But anyway, and this came up, and I was interviewed for it, and I knew the producer well, and I got it. And it's perfect. I mean, it's only down in Northumbria, so it's not commutable, but I can get down there in an hour and a half. And it's great. I mean, it's an interesting, quirky series. And we did the first one last year, and it was shown in January. Shown to not as many as they would like, but then 3 of the 6 episodes were against international football matches. So this time what they've done, thank goodness, is stick it out at either 8 or 9 on a Sunday evening, which is primetime viewing. Going back to your question about Star Maidens, did we ever think there might be a second series? We were under an option contract for this to do a second series, which Granada took up. And now, because they've stuck it in primetime on Sunday evenings, talk is beginning to wander around, well, maybe we could go into a third. I mean, they're actually pushing it this time. It's been going very well, I must admit. The filming's it's great fun. I mean, it's a beautiful place to film. Standing on a beach the other day, filming in an old railway carriage. Don't ask me how the carriage got there. Beautiful day, and literally a mile either side of you, just wonderful sand. 2 people and a dog on it, and you think, wonderful, absolutely wonderful.